Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Emerald Echoes from Post Curious. This is a puzzle tale, an escape room style game, and it takes place in the Emerald Flame universe. And narratively speaking, it's in the same universe as the Emerald Flame. I will note a few things before we dive into this. And number one, this is a prototype, all rules components subject to change. And number two, this is an escape room style game, which means inherently it's kind of hard to show you things or talk about things without having some degree of spoilers. To that end, for this review over here, I will not be opening this box. I will not be showing you anything. I'll call it spoiler adjacent. In order to be able to just talk about this at all, I will mention things that could loosely be considered spoilers, either by the loosest sense of the word. This is spoiler free. I'm someone who's spoiler sensitive, I would watch this review. But if you're super spoiler sensitive, then don't. And by spoilers, I mean I'll be talking about some of the kinds of things or pacing or things like that. I won't be going into any individual puzzle, and I won't be talking about the story past, again, general, very loose arcs. But again, if you're super spoiler sensitive, then either skip to final thoughts or skip this review entirely. But with that said, the Emerald Echoes takes place in the Emerald Flame universe. The Emerald Flame is arguably my favorite escape room game of all time, possibly to be beaten by Morrison Game Factory. It's hard. I think Emerald Flame had a the quality of the components and the immersion that they gave me was possibly the best there, and I think I like the story best of the Morrison Game Factory. So needless to say, I was very excited when the Emerald Echoes was announced, and I was even more excited that I got a chance to dive into and play this. That said, there's good news and there's bad news in this review. We'll get into it all, but the good news is this is kind of final thoughts at the beginning, but again, without me being able to show you things is a limit to what I can do. The good news is that this is still an excellent escape room style game. The bad news is I think it's not as good as other games from Post Curious. Generally, I absolutely rave about the experiences I've had with their games, and this one definitely comes in less so. So let's talk about a few different things, because again, I'm not going to show you anything in the box. General things. This is an escape room style game. Player count in this says 1+ players. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like most escape room style games, I would generally recommend this as a 2-player experience. I think that's where they shine. It allows you to not get stuck into your own lane of thinking. Plus, you have a collaborative experience with somebody else. But also, they are playable solo. You can go through these solo and have a good time, but you are limited to only the way you approach and think about things in the world. And then similarly, you can play it at higher player counts, at 3+. Personally, I find that, for me, escape room games shine at 2, are very good at 1 and 3, and once you get to 4, it tends to feel like we're just kind of passing the components back and forth and getting in each other's way, more so than helping. That's my general vibes, and I think that stands true for the Emerald Echoes as well, just based on my experience with it so far. That said, and this is where we're going to get into minor pacing, the minor pacing spoilers, no spoilers to the experience, but pacing things. The way Emerald Flame was structured, and Emerald Echoes is similar, is you have these envelopes. You're going to be given these envelopes that represent these months effectively. You're given bite-sized chunks of the mystery one at a time. And this is heavily narratively woven at the same time. It's been a while since I played the Emerald Flame, so I can't talk fully about that, but Emerald Flame definitely has some degree of narrative. I think that Morrison Game Factory to me is the strongest narrative. This one comes in more Morrison Game Factory than Emerald Flame, which makes sense. It looks like they brought in the writer of the Morrison Game Factory. It doesn't list him as the writer of the Emerald Flame, so I assume that's a newer thing, and it definitely adds to the experience from the narrative side of things. Because effectively, and again, spoiler free here, you are going through some degree of backstory in the world of the Emerald Flame. Similarly, at the same time, there's also a modern story going on with the characters that you are kind of simulating as you play through this. Almost gave me vibes of Assassin's Creed. If you ever played Assassin's Creed, it kind of gave me vibes of you have the story of Assassin's Creed, whichever one you're playing, and then you have the characters who are in the Animus and occasionally jumps back and forth. I kind of had that vibe. If you've played Assassin's Creed, this will make total sense. That's the vibe I got. You have present day characters examining past day events, and you're going through both of those stories simultaneously. That's, by the way, as spoiler as this gets. The idea that I'm telling you, hey, there's 2 stories going on at the same time. That's what I mean when I say light spoilers. I'm not getting into more details than that. Past that, there are these envelopes. There's 4 different envelopes going through the 4 different months that you're going through, and each one is a series of mini envelopes within those envelopes. This is, again, structural stuff over here. The way those envelopes work is each envelope, you kind of have a blue envelope, then a bunch of green envelopes, then a blue envelope. This is all structural as far as how this works. The blue envelope starts you off with a story as to what's going on in that envelope. then each green envelope is bringing you through the puzzle, so to speak. Because in each giant envelope, you have a bunch of tokens and mechanics and things and all these different things. You have a bunch of stuff coming in each big envelope. And then as you read each of the green envelopes, so again, blue, green, 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 blue, that kind of vibe, as you read each green envelope, you're kind of trying to figure out which of the elements you've been given do you need to incorporate into these puzzles. That's kind of the general vibe as far as the structure. So big envelope representing a larger story arc, smaller envelope representing the individual puzzles that you are approaching as you go through them. At the end of all of those puzzles, you're going to then go to the last blue envelope, which represent the non-puzzly culmination of that chapter, before you then go on to the next envelope. Now, one of the things that is a big change from previous games from Post Curious is usually in the past they've used a digital implementation where you go to some sort of website and you like punch in answers and it validates those answers or not. That's usually the way that they have structured things, as well as how and where you can get hints have generally been digitally done. In this game, it's not done that way. In this game, rather, you are going to have in each of those green envelopes, which represent the individual puzzle you're going through, there are kind of these sequentially revealed processes. The best way I would put it is it kind of mimics other players going through the exact same puzzle you have, piece by piece figuring it out, but it does so in a way that you can go through piece by piece to try to get a sense of things. So without getting too much into it, just imagine you had a genuine puzzle, like an actual puzzle with pieces going on, okay? So imagine you had that, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So imagine you're reading like a story arc, and someone's like, oh, well, maybe it would help if we separated these into like the flat edges and the edges and then the center. And you're like, oh, that's a good way to start. And then you don't have to go further. You're not giving the solution, but you just have kind of a tip, so to speak. And then the next one's like, well, now that we've done that, maybe if we subdivided the pieces by their general color, we'd have an easier time placing them where we see those color swatches. And you're like, oh, that makes sense too. So it's kind of watching other people solve the puzzle. And at any given point, you can play along with that or keep revealing to help you if you've gotten stuck. It's a very different vibe from their past games, and I think it works really well, both in terms of giving you this separate story that's going on, again, this present day arc you're exploring through, but then also in terms of giving you this way to get to the answers that feels almost less like you're getting hints. You can use it to validate the things you've done, which I have found it very helpful for. We'll get to review parts, I guess, soon enough. But you can use it to validate things you already know. You are using it to get to the answer, and it gives you a non-digital option, which can be particularly helpful for those who don't want a digital option in their games, which I generally feel that way. In the case of the Post-Curious games, I haven't minded, but I generally feel that I don't like the digital option. I don't like digital aspects, and so having a non-digital option it can be a good thing, and in my case, definitely is. That's kind of the general vibe. 4 envelopes, bunch of mini puzzles, going through the story, and the story as well as the puzzles to get to the end. That's what the Emerald Echoes is. Which I guess brings us to review stuff. Review stuff's going to be a little all over the place in this one in terms of its generally vibes, because again, I can't talk about individual things. I can just tell you the vibes and the experience I've had with the Emerald Echoes. I'll start by saying I definitely came in with high expectations. This is one of my most anticipated games that was launching on crowdfunding this month, and that definitely doesn't help in the sense that if those expectations are met, great. If those expectations aren't met, it's almost like unfair to the game, because I came in with very high expectations, and I do wonder where that puts me rating-wise. Like, I have a rating, we'll get to that at the end, but I do almost wonder if I should be more generous, but whether my expectations have lowered that rating to a small extent. But I'll start by the easy thing for me to say. This is my least favorite, well, 2 easy things. This is my least favorite Post-Curious game that I've played to date. I'll start with that. Also, by the standards of other escape room games, it's right where I'd expect them to be. Comparing this to any other Unlock game or Exit game or any of these other escape room games out there, the Mary Shelley Frankenstein, I actually kind of like that one a lot. But comparing it to a general escape room game experience, this is at or where I would need it to be. Comparing it to the standard that Post Curious has set for myself, this is definitely the lowest one I've played. And there's several reasons why, or at least several reasons why I feel that way, at least as of right now. Caveat, prototype, and all those things. First of all, pacing-wise, I will say pacing-wise, and this is where, minor spoiler on pacing, not on puzzles, it's a little interesting in the sense that the first 2 envelopes have a lot of puzzles in them, and then the next 2 envelopes have very few puzzles. Like, I'm not going to go exact counts, but I'll say that it goes in descending order as far as how many puzzles there are to solve, which to me is an expectation thing. I actually had a similar problem with the the Ministry of Lost Things from Post Curious had a similar issue where I kind of thought there was a final envelope, and the final envelope wasn't a final envelope. It was just more, it was finishing the narrative conclusion. And I was like, oh, I thought I wasn't done, and now I am done. And that kind of throws me off a little bit. And I had a similar structure with Emerald Echoes in the sense that the pacing of the first envelope was X, second envelope was X, third envelope was Y, and fourth envelope was even less than Y. Granted, they all had puzzle stuff, but again, from a pacing aspect, I wish I had known that going in, because it almost feels weird to be like, oh my gosh, like there's 4 hours of gameplay, but this first envelope took us like 2 hours to go through, and the second envelope's like 2 hours to go through, and the third, oh, I see where the drop off is. Like I kind of see, because it's like, it's listed 4+ hours, and I think that's roughly accurate. If I had to guess how long they took me, I would say roughly around 2 hours, and then maybe an hour, and maybe an hour, probably 45 minutes. That's what I'd guess is my rough pacing of the various envelopes. Everyone's gonna have a different experience, obviously. That's my overall pacing. So first of all, first critique is pacing. I think that when you set yourself up to a certain arc, you almost want to set players to allow or to expect for the fact that the finishing conclusion is going to be different. Because otherwise, I thought there were a lot more puzzles than there were. Which also, by the way, to its credit, that's good news. I was disappointed that there was less gameplay. So again, even though I'm going to be coming in critical compared to other Post-Curious games, I do want to emphasize that I do want you to hear that this is one of my less favorite Post-Curious games, but I also want you to hear that I still enjoyed it, and that compared to other escape room games, this is definitely a great experience. But that said, that's number one, is pacing. Number two is the puzzles. One of the compliments I have paid Post-Curious again and again and again, and this is the first time that I can no longer do so, at least for this particular game, and at least for me, is that I have always felt their puzzles were near perfect as far as the ability for me to engage with them, feel challenged by them, but then still persevere and get through them without having to rely on hints. If anything, hints have only ever been used to validate that what I've done so far is right, so that I'm not barking up the wrong tree for too long. But in general, their games have been absolutely fantastic as far as the difficulty scaling. This one, I do not feel that way about. I have felt a lot of the puzzles, a decent amount of the puzzles, I did not feel were intuitive in terms of how I should have gotten from point A to point B, even once I had the answers. This is the first time in an escape in a Post-Curious game where I've had to rely on the hints for, I would say, it's a rough guesstimate here, but I'd say roughly 25 to 30% of the puzzles I had to rely on hints to get to, because it wasn't clear to me exactly how to move forward or operate. And that's not my biggest complaint even. My bigger complaint is even in the times where the puzzle answer is presented, there were a lot of times where busy work was a key component. So an example of me by busy work is, let's say for a second that I have solved a what's the word for it? When you have crypto stuff, when you have like crypto, oh my gosh, code breaking, whatever it is a term, code breaking things. If I've figured out the code, and then it still takes me 25 minutes to decode the rest of the message, even though I know what to do, it's just, annoying to do so. That happened in a few puzzles. There were a few puzzles where I was like, okay, I got it, I figured it out, but I still have to go step by step to do this, and that's not the satisfying enjoyment of solving a puzzle. That's just busy work. And so by the time I got to the end of the game, there were 1 or 2 times towards the end where I was like, I have clearly solved this. I am just going to skip the rest of this decrypting and just go to the answer, because I clearly got the answer. So that's one small complaint there. Similarly, the answer, I said the complaint about the fact that I did feel the need to check puzzles. I did not always find them as intuitive, and even once going through the answers, I didn't feel that sense of satisfaction. Like whenever I play escape room games and I do look for a hint, it's usually, not always, usually it's like, I should have figured that out. Like that makes sense. I should have gotten that. And not always, which is one of the reasons Post-Curious has been my go-to escape room game company, because I've always felt nothing but like, oh my gosh, great, amazing job, top of the line. And I think for this game, they kind of have shifted, for me, at least for Emerald Echoes, it's shifted down to what I would expect from a general escape room game, which is some things are really clever, some things I can do, some I don't know, and I look at the answer and I'm like, I should have gotten that. And then some I look at the answer and I'm like, I don't know if I should. So we have that aspect as far as the general puzzle difficulty. We have the annoyance of having to go through solving something tedious that you've already solved. Similarly, in terms of the puzzles themselves, there were a few times where I was 99% sure that I was getting to the answer correctly, but then there was a lack of clarity along the way. This is where it's tricky to get into details without covering certain puzzles, but I will say that, I guess the way I'd put it is, if I figured out what to do, but the resulting answer is blurry, I don't even know if I'm right, and that's not an issue of the logic used, that's an issue of it's just blurry. Like, I figured out, I did all the stuff, I did all the things, I have an answer, and the answer's blurry. And if the answer's blurry, was I right or was I not? That happened again a few times, not just once. There were at least 2 instances that I can recall offhand where I figured out an answer and then from a component. This is very much a prototype thing, potentially, meaning it could well be a prototype issue where the component-wise that got in the way. There was one particular puzzle where something was logically wrong in the puzzle side that prevented me from getting the answer, but that didn't bother me as much. I'm sending that over to them as a little note just to hopefully clear that up. But there's one thing where I'm like, without getting too much into it, you could result at conclusion B, and you could result at conclusion A. I happen to result at conclusion A. This is not an opinion thing, this is a factual thing, whatever we can get into. I'm not going to get into it with you. That one didn't bother me as much because I was like, oh, I got it. I see what happened there. Whatever, small details. Overall, my experience of the Emerald Echoes, and I guess I haven't gone to things I like. The things I like about the game is, first of all, the narratives were great. This, to me, was probably second to the Morrison Game Factory. Probably second, it's hard to say. Ministry of Lost Things was also pretty awesome. I don't know which one I'd rank higher, but definitely Morrison Game Factory is my best narrative game from Post Curious. This one is it's probably tied-ish for Ministry of Lost Things. I love the narrative. I love the characters. I thought it was really well written. I thought it gripped me in terms of both storylines that were happening in the game. So top-notch on that. Many of the puzzles were still excellent. I think I'm spending a little more time focusing on the critical because of how much I usually rave about their games, that I think the critical stuck out at me more, which isn't necessarily fair. Is that aspect where they set such a high standard for themselves that the things that stand out to me are the things that didn't go well and not the things that did go well. But I'd say 75%, 70% of the experience still delivered a fantastic experience in which I enjoyed the puzzles, I felt they were well presented. Oh, the last criticism. I know I'm saying this in the middle of the positive. Last criticism is this one felt more sequential in the way they did it, and I don't know if that had to do with the answer system as far as the pivot that they had there, but this felt probably the most sequential, and I think one of the things I loved, and different other games have been different. I do think Morrison Game Factory was a little bit more open-ended. I think Ministry of Lost Things was a little bit more sequential. This one felt more sequential than Ministry of Lost Things, in my opinion, but it probably was about par. But I think the original Emerald Flame, one of the things that hooked me the most about it was it past the envelopes you got, it felt so wide and open in terms of how you approached it in a way that I absolutely loved and thought it was excellent. This one made it more sequential, which arguably should make it easier, but didn't even do that at the same time. And so I got a more linear approach to the story as opposed to just like, here's all the stuff to deal with, which can be overwhelming, but also can be very rewarding. And so in particular, that's not even a critique around the sequential versus open, that's more an expectation thing. Emerald Flame was very open and gigantic in the way it addressed it, in the way it gave it to you, and this one is much more linear, which is not what I expected from this. So again, expectations versus reality is the criticism there. I think overall, final thoughts wise on Emerald Echoes, I think Post Curious does a fantastic job. To me, they are still the gold standard of escape room games, at least so far. But I do think Emerald Echoes was my least favorite from their games. And that goes into the things I kind of touched upon. The difficulty was more similar to a general escape room game as opposed to the perfect difficulty I've come to expect from them. There's some small issues as far as the puzzle stuff. But then outside of that, the general experience was still a positive one, where, as I mentioned already, I was still sad that the final envelopes had less content than what I wanted from them. Rating-wise, I'm coming in at a 3.5 out of 5, and I do wonder if it deserves a 4. I do wonder that. That goes back to, like, the tricky part here is I love escape room games, and I think I'm being a little harsher on this because of how much I've come to enjoy and expect from a Post-Curious game. I would say that I think that I'm going to leave it as a 3.5. These days, when I have a rating, if I'm not sure where to go, I tend to round down as opposed to rounding up. I still think it's fantastic. I still think it's worth getting, but I would recommend, I haven't played everything from Post Curious. I believe I have not played Adrift, and I'm still only halfway through their the tarot card ones. So I've played most of their games at this point, not all of them, and I will say that while I still recommend getting Emerald Echoes, I think that if you're looking for my top tier recommendations, this is where we're going to shift to recommendations at the end. Recommendations wise, my top tier recommendations are definitely the Emerald Flame and the Morrison Game Factory. Those are my two favorite games from Post Curious. If you're looking for something outside of their catalog, I definitely recommend Mother of Frankenstein. I think it's a fantastic escape room series. It's a series of 3 games. I have not played all of them. I played the first one. I think the first one's fantastic. I still need to play the others. And then outside of that, I think Unlock and Exit always deliver a good experience. I think to me, Emerald Echoes comes like above Unlock and Exit and below, Post Curious's other titles and possibly below Mother of Frankenstein. It's still a great game, and if you like their games, you should get this and play it. But if you haven't tried their games, this isn't where I'd recommend you start. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video useful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.